Let's look at two approaches for creating interactive density plots in R. In the first approach, we use ggplot2 to create a density plot for a specific variable, and then we use the ggplotly function from the plotly package to make the graphic interactive. Specifically, we are going to create a density plot of the bill length millimeter variable for each species using the penguins dataset available in the Palmer Penguins package. So in the one graphic, we're going to have three different densities, one for each species, and we're going to use semi-transparent colors to distinguish between the density plots for each group. So here's the code I'm going to use to produce the plot below. I start by giving the penguins data frame to the ggplot function, and then for the density geometry, I am going to associate the bill length millimeter variable with the x aesthetic. In order to get the different density curves separately for each species, I'm going to specify fill equals species, which tells ggplot2 to use different fill colors for each density, allowing me to distinguish them. And then another important aspect of this plot is specifying alpha equals 0.3, which makes the colors used for the three densities to be semi-transparent so I can see where they overlap each other. If I don't do that, then some of the densities are going to overlap in such a way that it obscures your ability to see what the density is for one of the other groups. Once I create that density plot, I assign it the name ggdens so that I can pass it to the ggplotly function to make the densities interactive. When I hover my mouse over each density, I can see the species associated with each one of these density curves. I can see the value along the x-axis for this particular density, and then I can see the density associated with that particular x value. And that same pattern will hold as I move to the different densities available in this plot. Perhaps surprisingly, there's actually no easy way to create a typical density plot natively using the plotly package. By far the easiest approach is to actually create a density using ggplot2 and then make the graphic interactive. However, there is a workaround to creating a density plot using the plotly package directly, but you have to go through a few additional steps. The main thing you need to do is that externally you need to get information about the density for whatever variable you want to plot. You can use the base density function to do this if you want, and then extract the associated x and y values of the density and then plot that using the plotly package. But we're not going to do that because we want to recreate this graphic right here, which has separate densities for each species. And so I could just run the density function 3 different times and then combine that information, but that was more trouble than I wanted to go to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the layer_data function to extract the information from the ggplot2 density plot and assign it the name dens_data. And this is going to store all the different variables that ggplot2 was relevant for creating a density plot. So you can see I have saved that information right here. So I use the layer_data function to pull out the information from ggdens. I assign it the name dens_data, and then I'm going to use the head function to look just at a few of the rows in that data frame. And when I do that, I see many variables. So fill indicates the fill color used to color the graphic. The y variable is the density associated with each x value for each species. There's also a separate density variable that gives you the exact same information. There's some other information here that we don't really care about, but the other variable that we really do care about is the group variable. Because we have 3 different densities here, one for each group, it's going to be important to distinguish those groups when we try to recreate this plot using the plotly package directly. One further thing I need to do is I actually need to change this group variable into something more easily usable by the plotly package. So I'm going to use the factor function to convert it to a factor variable, a categorical variable, and I'm going to change the labels from 1, 2, 3 to Adelie, Chinstrap, and Gentoo, which are the names of the penguin species associated with each one of those group values. And then I just resave that back into the group variable that's stored in dens_data. So once again, I just extracted this, converted it to a factor, changed the labels, then put it back right where it originally started. Now that I have that information, I can use the Plotly package to directly create an interactive density plot. So I'm going to use the Plotly function to create my graphic. I'm going to associate the x variable of dens_data with the x attribute of the plot. I'm going to associate the density variable stored in dens_data with the y attribute of my plot. I'm going to associate the group variable with the split argument of my plot. And the split argument is roughly equivalent to the group aesthetic in ggplot2. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a separate trace or drawing for each of the levels associated with the group variable I give to the split argument. Some other key things here, I'm going to specify type equals scatter, because this is actually a scatter plot I'm going to create. I'm just going to connect the x and y points. And because of that, I'm going to specify mode equals line. So I don't get a bunch of points, but I'm actually going to get a line for each one of the groups associated with the split argument. And in order to change the x-axis label, I actually need to use the layout function in order to customize that part of my plot. And unlike ggplot2, where we would add a plus here, you actually can pipe one part of your plot into another function associated with your Plotly graphic. And so we take the original Plotly graphic, we pipe it into the layout function, then I'm going to customize the x-axis label, and specifically I want to change the title to bill length millimeter. And so when I run that code, I get this graphic right here. I couldn't figure out an easy way to shade the different densities, but this works okay. And so you can see that we have a different color density line associated with each one of the groups. And when I hover my mouse along the density curve here, I can see the X point. So right here is 36.4591. That's the bill length. And the associated density is 0.109. And so you can see that we can do that for each one of these density curves. We have nice different colors for each group, and we have the colors distinguished in this legend on the right-hand side of my plot. So those are the two different approaches that you can use to construct an interactive density plot in R. I think that the first approach, where you can create the graphic using ggplot2 and then make it interactive using the ggplotly function, is by far the easier approach. But if you work a little harder, you can create a set of density curves directly with the Plotly package.